Hey, hope all is well. This week, I'd like to stem off our conversation from last week regarding the concept of I. Just a quick recap, we did the concept of I being divided into three subjects, in which one is the consciousness, the moral, ethical behavior, just realizing who is I as a person and on an individual level. This week, I want to discuss it on the mental aspect of it, which is like the IQ, the EQ of an individual, and the third is the body, the physical, the just the nature and the environment, which I don't know if I'll discuss next week or if it's even on the agenda. And I gotta think about this, but that's another thing that's in the concept of I think it'll be easy to say when I'm speaking of the individual that's what I'm referring to. It's just the concept of I. What is like I am dot dot dot. You know what I mean? So since we discussed the aspect from the consciousness level, that we're aware that there is an individual, which is me, and the good and bad of the moral behaviors that individual partakes in last week. I'd like to discuss what happens when an individual realizes that their actions have greater impact and how they use their intelligence to overall benefit society as a whole. And before we get to that, I just want to say using the intellect on any scale is very adjustable. When you want to make a change in your personal life, will take the same effort, difficulties that it'll take to make a change on a communal level, on a societal level, or even on a global scale. It's the same effort, same intellect, and same perseverance required. The only difference is there's just more variable as you scale up. So the effort's going to be equivalent. It's just more variables that you're not aware of. So when you're working on yourself, you might overlook 3 things. When you're trying to work on a communal level, you'll overlook 30 things. On societal level, 300, globalized, 3 million. So it exponentially goes up too. It's not linear. It goes up exponentially because as you get bigger, it's hard to keep into perspective how minuscule you are, because at the end of the day, it's the same. It's only one person with 24 hours in a day. So you just become less aware of like the downside. So like that's just the pros and cons to adjusting the scales, because once you go on like a higher level of bigger than the individual, misunderstandings happen. Even if you're just talking to one person in one conversation, even old friends, a misunderstanding is very easy. So you constantly have to like ask your friend, what do you mean? What did you mean when you said that? This is what I mean, blah blah blah. Make sure, even on two people that like have known each other, will run into misunderstandings at a point here and there. And sometimes the initial plans backfire. That's a big issue, because sometimes you wanted to do one thing, you didn't foresee negative consequences regarding something else. When it backfires, it's hard to admit you're wrong and you keep doing it, but the thing that you neglected is just compounding itself. So that it's very important to course correct. And in large scales, it's very important to remember the perspective of the change that you're trying to make, because if you're really trying to help 1,000 people, you also have to look at the 100 people that you're fucking over or not helping. And you gotta understand that when you get criticized about it, it's most likely because the person that's saying something or like pointing it out is looking at the 100 people that you're neglecting, and is gonna totally disregard how many people you help, which is very important because nobody should get like neglected. So you have to hear out opposing opinions on what they're saying, which is getting harder and harder, especially with like the polarization of content intake, because people are no longer seeking information, they're just seeking confirmation, which is scary, which is kind of scary. But um, humans adapt, and we'll adapt to this too. So I don't think it's a now problem. I think humans have always looked for confirmation. The only difference is the distribution has been so much easier, which makes it scary. To like, you should really verify what you're saying, and you should look at what the other person's saying too, because they might not be right, but they might not be wrong either. Like there's always a gray area. It's not always black and white, especially when like more than like 30 people involved. Like, yo, there's a lot of gray area, because you don't know what the other person knows, and you don't know what you don't know. So those are very two important things to remember when you're when you're trying to change the scales of your operation. You have to make sure internally you're good, your team is good and on the same page, the people you're trying to serve understand what you're doing and they're okay with it, because nobody likes unsolicited contributions, because they'll just be like, I genuinely don't believe people like handouts. Like, no matter what people say, if given the opportunity to create it or just get it to them, short term, yeah, of course, just getting it seems better, but I don't think anything of substantial gratification comes from just being handed something. So I genuinely believe that people like working, creating, and contributing. So that's very important when you're scaling anything, no matter how high you want to take it, or it's important to know your limits, because sometimes your limits are what makes you happy. So now that we discussed the scales, I just quickly want to address why I want to talk about the communal level improvement, because this is probably an outdated statistics, but approximately 3% of the global population leaves their country of birth. So I read this in 2016. You add in the variables. Let me just run the quick math. Okay, adding a population growth okay. Let's just go with less than 5%. I think that would be cool. Less than 5%, which is still like slightly over 300 million, which is like, I don't know, the population of the US. So immigration, it is an issue, but it's not dire. Like, there's bigger issues in the world, like climate change. Speaking of climate change, I find climate change activists quite hilarious, because their heart is in the right place. Like, by all means, yo, I love the mission that they're on, but I think I think it comes back to blind hope, in saying that, yeah, we can. So has human actions accelerated climate change? Yes. Can we decrease it? Maybe. Can we stop it? No. Earth itself is constantly changing, and over some time it either gets hit by a rock or goes through a natural ice age. And yes, we shouldn't accelerate the issue, but I think we should also energy and resources being allocated to straight up like slowing down the issue. I think a portion should be directed towards what happens when there's an ice age, what happens when the earth is inhabitable, which I think Elon's been like saying. So I don't know if Mars is the answer, but if he makes it happen, yo, like that's cool, good for you. I don't know if Mars is the answer though, personally, but then again, I don't know. And just because I don't think Mars is the answer is exactly the reason I'm not gonna stop someone else from trying. So like that's always like never made sense to me, is like when someone's like, that's not the answer. Do you know the answer? No. So why are you stopping the other guy? You know what I mean? Like, let him do what he gotta do. So that I think that's very important. So either you have the answer or you don't. If you don't, it's okay. Do you have a possible way to address the issue? If yes, address it. If not, it's okay, but don't criticize someone for trying, you know? Because they might prove you wrong, which they most likely will. So it's like, you should always trust. Trust but verify, actually. You should always trust, but you should verify. Like, people talk a lot, people say a lot, people do a lot, so it's important to trust but verify. Going back to using the intellectual to create a better community, right? How is this possible? And one thing I want to do, one way I want to like say is, you can always make society better by community service. I think community service has always been a pillar of my upbringing. It's something I've always strived to do, and I think contributing is amazing, and not just monetary values, but also your time, your experience, your knowledge. So community service is super important to me. So I'm going to use that as an example, because for a community service event to be optimized, let's talk about the optimization of community service event. In my opinion, two things need to happen. One group needs to be engaged, and one group needs to be either assisted or serviced. So if it's donations of food, material, I'll leave that to assistance. If it's spending time with like the elderly at like a nursing home or anything like that, that's being serviced to. So I think community service is super important, because it really brings two different groups together to make one whole communal group. And now, what do I mean by that? Generally, there is one group. Let's go with the idea of younger kids helping older folks, because I actually have a great real life example from it, and I could really like just demo off that. So before we get into that, let me tell you what I want to talk about. So this happened during COVID. Around I read this story around, I want to say April, maybe May. So what this I don't remember what town it was in, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't just one town. I think it was many towns doing this. So what happened was, COVID made a turned L-shaped curve on the risk thing. So it went like younger kids to majority of like young to mid-age people were low risk, and then it spiked up in the age group segment. So elder people were more at risk. So when it was, the data was showing that like it's making an L-shaped, what this individual did was he utilized um, the younger demographics, so the kids, the teenagers, to make food deliveries, discretionary consumer goods from like CVS and Walgreens, delivery services for elder people in the community. And I just felt that was so amazing. That was, it was, I don't know how efficient it was, but the concept was just so amazing. It was like, how could you even hate on that, right? And it did two things. It engaged the younger community because not having to go to school, having all this time at home, it was a lot. It was a lot to take in for anyone. So he engaged them to like have a duty, have a sense of responsibility, and he serviced the older people by getting their needs met with, while still staying in a low risk environment for them, which was brilliant. Um, and I really wish the media covered more of that. Like, not media, because internet articles did cover it. That's how I came across it. But I'm talking about the national media. Like, it was very, it was overwhelming, especially in the first few months. All to see was just like the death count accumulation. It's like, why would you like it? That's right in your face, man. Like, that's ridiculous. So that was cool to see. That was good, like feel good news. Engaging one aspect and servicing other. And that's how a community gets built, is through engagement and contribution. So now the youth had responsibility, things to do, and the elder community didn't feel left out. They didn't feel they were forgotten about, which is extremely important. That was really good. And the reason I say adjusting of scales is easy to do, well, not easy to do, it has its own challenges, of course, but the reason I said you can conceptualize adjusting the scales on bigger to on any scale that you desire is because this was done on a community level. But if you think about on a globalized scale, right? For example, now this is just like hypothetical now. This is a historical trend in which younger folks tend to leave the towns and the villages that they're in to go into a more urban population to create an income, to create something of themselves, which is good. It always has happened in this particular manner, and I don't think this trend is going anywhere. So it's important to address what happens after they leave the community. So if the younger folks are going into the populous areas, more urbanized areas, the town that they're leaving is short a talent per se, and someone to preserve that town's culture is gone. So that needs to be addressed in some way, and if someone could figure it out, that I'm pretty sure that'd be cool. And another issue that has rose over the years, and like the trend is now very, very obvious, is like there are nations that are wealthy, and there are nations that are not well developed, and people that live in the wealthier nations tend to be older, and the people living in the less well-developed nations, they're a very younger generation. The age group is extremely young. I think, using Africa as an example, I think it's around 20, but don't quote me. I'm just making that up, but like that sounds right, so I want to say it. But now two things are happening though. I'm gonna use Africa as an example, and I'm gonna use Japan as an example for no other reason other than they're the first two that popped in my head that really highlight what's going on and how someone can possibly capitalize on this. Japan's population has stagnated, if not decreased, due to a slower reproduction and all that, people getting more, there's a higher group aging. So eventually there's going to be a high healthcare cost there, you know, and tides will change. The old guard, they always say the truth doesn't change. It's just the old guard dog leaves, right? Uh, and what's going on in Africa is, you could tell, is economically, if you don't want to say there's a fire there, there's definitely the spark happening, and it's about to take off. Um, Trade has been going up. As they're getting more exposed to the internet, the entire African continent, man, that's a technological gold mine, and if someone can capitalize on that they could really make a difference, because they could assist in getting resources that are hard to get through the use of tech, if not by delivering it to them, teaching them the efficient way to do it. So yeah, like I think that's how you could scale on a globalized level. You see very two distinguished demographics, uh, and you kind of see the trend going on, and you could either, if you assist in preventing the decline, you're good. If you could assist in accelerating the escalation, you're good. Um, and I think that's how an intellect to contribute to society helps. You either accelerate the ascension, or you, in an ideal world, you eliminate it, but in a realistic world, you decelerate the declining, along with setting up new path to ascend again, because life's cyclical. Every ups has its downs, every peak has its valleys, so the cyclical change happens all the time. So I know a lot of people that have become, that have made a good fortune shorting stocks, and I know people that rode the wave of Facebook and they went up. So you know, it's like they both work, they're both needed. What side do you want to choose to be on, and how can you help? I think that's what it comes down to. I think the number one question that should be, so the mind's very like problem solving, and one problem that you should constantly ask your mind is, how can I improve life, whether it be on an individual level, a communal level, like how we discussed about those towns that set up like delivery services for the elderly, by the kids, or even on a global level, in which you see two nations, two different demographics. They need services over there, that they have the wealth that could be transferred back. So as long as you could circulate it around, you know, there's a lot of problems to be solved. And with that being said, I think we're at a good place to stop today's lecture. And next week, I don't know if I'm gonna speak about the physical aspect of the eye, but we'll see, because I don't know, man. It's a very, very interesting topic, because as I'm thinking about like everything the human body has, I really want to discuss it, but none of it makes sense, because the human body is literally something you have to feel. And unless you go through the whole five sensory, the sensories experience on your own, just listening about it makes no sense. So I'll see how I feel. If I think I have good material, I'll discuss it. If not, we'll talk about it. But either way, till then, with everything happening in the world, I appreciate you spending some time with me. Take care.